An account of the Holy Baptism in the 7th century. Summary of baptism in the 7th century. Adrian is mentioned as the first one who, in this century, declared himself, not so much in words as in deed, against infant baptism. As to the manner, however, in which the Romanists proceeded against him, shall be more fully spoken of elsewhere. The Bracerentian papists, to prevent the decline of infant baptism, confirm it in a certain council. The Pope also decrees that during the Mass the kiss of peace be offered to the people, in order that the Mass, which, it appears, was esteemed but little by many, might be regarded the more highly. The believers were not turned away from their faith by said papal decree. Nay, it appears that even some of the Roman Church declared themselves against the papal superstitions, as 1. Isidorus, 2. Caesarius, 3. Adelhamius, 4. Agatho, 5. Julian Pomorius. The Christian parents, Lutgerus and Libuga, left their son Lutgerus unbaptized, till he, having accepted the faith in France, was baptized thereupon. Finally, the difference between those of the Roman Church and those who administered baptism upon faith. Conclusion of the account for this century. The Emperor Phocas, A.D. 606, conferred upon the Roman bishop the title of Papa, that is, Pope or Supreme Father, which name was first assumed by Boniface III, writing, in the decrees emitted by him to enjoin obedience, we will, we ordain, we decree, we command, etc., thus I will, thus I ordain, thus I decree, thus I command, whereby many superstitions and human inventions were presented to the people as the word of God, such as image worship, salutation of the sacrament, observance of infant baptism is necessary to salvation, etc. Yet many pious people not only refused to obey all these things which the Pope prescribed, but some even flatly opposed it, daring to censure, reject, and contumn, some in this and some in that respect, the papal and Roman superstitions, as among other points, was done with regard to infant baptism and all that pertains to it, with which not only some of the common people, but also some eminent and learned men were dissatisfied, so that they abandoned it altogether, yea, indicated by words and actions that they were opposed to it, which became manifest even in Rome, as will be shown in the proper place. Asterisk. Asterisk AD 605. At this time, Gregory the Great wrote, if a bishop, whoever he be, is called a general bishop, that is, pope, the whole church decays. A.D. 606, in this very year, in which the Pope was accepted, by Phocas, as the head of the general Latin Church, the celebrated teacher and Bishop Adrian publicly opposed infant baptism, wishing neither to baptize the children himself, nor to have them baptized, but utterly refusing them baptism, on account of which he was accused by Gregory the Great, Bishop of Rome, to John, Bishop of Larissa, as appears from a certain letter sent by Gregory to John, in which, among other things, the following is contained. The second article of the accusation against Bishop Adrian is this, that he refused baptism to infants, thus letting them die. It appears, indeed, that this said Adrian was criminally punished for his views against infant baptism, and because he let the infants die unbaptized, as is stated by the ancients, and shall appear more fully in our account of the martyrs. A.D. 610, infant baptism, it appears, being at this time, held in very little esteem by many, whether in consequence of the teaching of the above-mentioned Adrian, or for some other reason, so that it was considered useless and not necessary to salvation, those of the Roman Church publicly opposed this sentiment, in order either to eradicate it, or, at least, to excommunicate it by the anathema of the Pope, wherefore, A.D. 610, in the Second Bracerentian Council, among other articles, it was established, decreed, and published, that infants must be baptized, as necessary to their salvation. About A.D. 670, at this time, the holy baptismal ordinance of Christ was still rightly observed in Egypt, namely, the doctrines of the faith were preached to the candidates before baptism, yea, this practice was so highly regarded there, that some in other countries, separating from the Roman Church in this article resolved to maintain the Christian religion according to the example of the Egyptian Christians, hence they were styled beginners in the Christian religion. In allusion to this, quotation of Viscum's, lib. 2, cap. 3, from Jacob Pamelia's book on Tertullian, is no doubt made, saying that the beginners in the Christian religion, that is, those who, separating from the Roman Church, established the Christian religion upon the original apostolical foundation, adopted the practice of catechization, that is, teaching the doctrines of the faith, before baptism from the Egyptian divines. A.D. 699, the decree of Pope Leo II, for the confirmation of infant baptism and the Mass, as mentioned for the year 682, did not have the effect of causing the believers who had separated from the Roman Church, and maintained the baptism upon faith, to swerve in the least from their faith and the practice of the same. On the contrary, it appears that still more, yea, even learned men, separated from the Roman Church in this said article and joined the little flock of Christ, so that some of them who formerly had maintained infant baptism The Mass, the traditions, the meritoriousness of good works, and the 7 sacraments, now taught differently, and opposed the Pope in these points. Of these, 5 persons are mentioned in the Chronicles, whom P. J. Twisk, in his 7th book for the year 699, notes, saying, Isidorus, Caesarius, Adelhamius, Agatho, and Julian Pomorius taught in opposition to the Pope concerning the Holy Scriptures, justification, good works, that there are but 2 sacraments, and concerning the name of the Church, which was not built upon Peter, but on Christ. A.D. 700, we come now to the last year of this century, in which we perceive that at that time not only those of Jewish or heathen parentage, but also those born of Christian parents, were instructed in the faith before they were admitted to baptism, so that the Christians who sought the salvation of their children, left them unbaptized, till they were able themselves to confess their sins, profess the faith, and thereupon desire baptism as a sign of the same. Among these, the 2 pious Christians, Lutgerus and his wife Libuga, are not considered of the least. It is stated of them, that they left their son Lutgerus unbaptized, till he, having learned and accepted the faith in Jesus Christ, in France, was baptized thereupon. A.D. 700. We now leave this account of baptism in the 7th century, in which, on the one side, the oppressed believers practiced the true ordinance of the baptism of Christ upon faith, while, on the other side, the oppressing Roman Church deviated the longer the more from it, so that they not only forsook, but also opposed the command of Christ to baptize only upon faith. On the other hand, infant baptism and many other superstitions were so firmly established, that almost no one except those who did not fear the anathema of the Pope, and death, dared oppose these things. It is truly astonishing, what P. J. Twisk writes, and truthfully, concerning this, in his conclusion to the 7th century, with which we will also conclude this, the Pope of Rome, having been declared head of all the churches by the Emperor Phocas, gradually established the boundaries of his power, authority and jurisdiction, not only in but also beyond Italy, yea, beyond Europe, and this with exceeding haughtiness. The pomp and greatness became unendurable, yea, the avarice of the clergy generally was so great that they obtained ecclesiastical offices through presents, in order to derive temporal gain therefrom, and would scarcely baptize an infant, unless money was given them for it. An account of those who suffered in the 7th century, summary of the martyrs of the 7th century. After the oppression exercised by the heathen and Arians, the Roman Pope also began to direct his arrows against the Orthodox Christians. This forms the beginning of our account. Bishop Adrian, refused baptism to infants, is now criminally punished for this cause. A.D. 606. Many Christians apprehended by the Longobards, and put to death. A.D. 614, because they refused to eat, in honor of the idols, food offered to idols. Of the sufferings of the Christians in Persia, and how a great many of them were delivered from imprisonment, given for the year 628. Mention made of 8 severe persecutions instituted against Christian believers, from A.D. 622, to the close of the century, the places where these persecutions happened, and the names of some of the tyrants who originated them. Further observations concerning said persecutions and martyrs, which concludes the account of the martyrs of this century. When first the heathen and then the Arians, the former by open, wicked violence, the latter by secret, tyrannical hypocrisy, had for a long time not only scattered the flock of Christ, but devoured with wolves' teeth, as it were, many of its innocent and defenseless lambs, then, in this century, a thing almost unheard of, the Roman bishop, now called Pope, began to arise as the forerunner of Antichrist, seeking to destroy those who opposed the Roman Church, not only by anathematizing, excommunicating, and awfully threatening them, which alone would have been sufficient to strike terror into the heart, but, besides this, it seems, by criminal and actual punishments, which generally touch the body or the life. Of this we hope presently to show an example from which the rest of his wicked deeds may be inferred. Adrian, a Christian bishop or teacher, criminally punished for rejecting infant baptism, about the close of the year 606. In our account of baptism for the year A.D. 606, teacher and Bishop Adrian, and stated, from a certain letter sent by Gregory the Great to John, Bishop of Larissa, that Adrian was accused of having refused baptism to infants. But it seems it did not stop at said accusation, but that they, to all appearance, proceeded further and more severely and cruelly against him, for the above was imputed to him for a crime or a heinous sin. Hence he was criminally proceeded against, though said punishment was ordained for great crimes and criminals, yet in the case of Adrian, we can perceive, it was founded on nothing but his disregard and rejection of infant baptism, as appears from the sequel of Gregory's letter to John, which reads thus, pursuant to the chapter of criminal matters, a charge was preferred against Bishop Adrian, or brought against him by way of punishment, concerning the children which, by his orders, had been kept from baptism. and died in darkness, unbaptized, or unwashed from the filth of sin. But whether said sentence was actually executed on him, is not clearly expressed, hence we commit the truth of the matter to God. Notice concerning the following martyrs noted by P. J. Twisck for the years 614 and 628, and recorded by U.S. We have not been able to obtain certain or clear information as regards the confession of faith of the martyred persons of whom we shall presently speak, hence we dare not reckon them all indiscriminately among the true and orthodox confessors of the true faith, the more especially, as the sword of persecution then came upon all who bore the Christian name, in places where such persecutions occurred. Of many Christians who were apprehended by the Longobards, and put to death by them, because, in honor of the idols, they refused to eat food offered to idols. A.D. 614. The Longobards, says Twisck, apprehended many Christians, and sought to compel them to eat meat which they had offered to their idols, and when they refused, they put them to death. They also put to death 400 who would not worship their gods. As to what might be adduced concerning the confession of faith of these slain persons, and how far we accept them as martyrs, see the foregoing notice. Continuing in his account, the above-mentioned author finally speaks of the year 628, for which, in the beginning, he records these words, about this time, the Christians had to suffer much also in Persia. He then relates that the Emperor Heraclius, having come into Persia, liberated many of the imprisoned Christians. Of 8 severe persecutions instituted against Christian believers, from A.D. 622 to the close of this century. It behooves us to record here, that from A.D. 622 to the close of this century, various other persecutions and severe oppressions were instituted against those who were called Christian believers, among whom, to all appearance, there were here and there some who died upon a pure confession of faith, of which persecutions and oppressions of the Christian believers, among others, 8 are enumerated, which we will briefly extract from A. Melanus. Having spoken of the chronology of the Turks or Mohammedans, he proceeds to the year 622, and says, 1. In Italy a new persecution arose against the Christians who resided there, under the Arian king of the Longobards. 2. In France also some, namely, Christian believers were made martyrs. 3. Constantine, the son of Heraclius, having reigned 4 months, and Heracleonas 6 months, Constant, the son of Constantine, became emperor, and reigned for 27 years. He followed in the footsteps of his grandfather Heraclius, in espousing the cause of the Monothelites, and for the sake of this sect carried on a severe persecution, namely, against those Christians who held different views. 4. In the 28 years during which said 3 emperors reigned, the Arabians or Saracens conquered many countries and cities, and put to death a countless number of Christians, namely, of those who lived under said reign. There was also considerable commotion in France and England, understand, on account of the Christian religion. He afterwards says. 5. But in France, during the 17 years of his reign several were put to death as martyrs. After this, he speaks of the persecutions which, during the 27 years comprising the reign of Justinian II, and the time of Leontius and Tiberius Apsimarus, arose against the Christians, through the Longobards as well as the Saracens. Finally he says, also in France, 6. In England, 7. In Germany, and in Spain 8. Many became martyrs at this time. What has been remarked concerning the martyrdom of those slain in the years 614 and 628, applies also to the 8 persecutions just mentioned, hence, see the above-mentioned notice. Further observations touching the above-mentioned martyrs. Here we are compelled to leave our account of the martyrs of this century, since the ancient writers have left us no further information respecting this matter, at least we have not found anything more that would shed light on the subject. However, it will be sufficient for the defense of the Church of the Anabaptists, for, though among the great number of martyrs that have been noticed by us there are found but few open professors of the faith, but this diminishes neither the respectability nor the verity of said cross-bearing Church, since already in our account of baptism throughout this century various, yea, many, professors of said faith have been presented, to prevent and oppose whom divers means were frequently resorted to. Moreover, it seems hardly possible that all those who were, in such great numbers, it appears, designated Anabaptists, in the 5th century, and against whom bloody decrees were ordained, a.d. 413, should all have been slain and exterminated so that none were left remaining, those remaining, for it can scarcely be otherwise, allowed the living faith which was in them, to manifest and work out its power, in order to implant in the people of that age, but especially, in their children and descendants, the belief and doctrine which they themselves professed, and for the sake of which they had imperiled their lives, escaping death however, through the grace of God. In the following, 6th century there were again people of such belief and doctrine, and not only that, but such as to honor Christ their Savior, did not hesitate, as true martyrs, to pour out their blood like water. Blood like water. Blood like water.